Howdy, and welcome back to Celebrating Vintage Model Kits. Today we're going to be looking at an Aurora quarter scale famous fighter series Boeing F4B-4. This is kit number 122-69, first released in 1958. This particular issue that I have here is a 1958 issue. Box art was by the famous Joe Catula when he was doing work for Aurora. Some of their best box art was done by Joe. This particular kit was acquired at a recent model kit collectors swap meet, and I was pretty excited to find it because it's a fairly rare kit for the Aurora series. It was only issued a couple of times. It was only reissued by a couple of their affiliates like K&B and Aurora Canada, and that was it. So it's a somewhat hard kit to find, so I was pretty excited to find it. And so a little bit about the Boeing F4B. The F4B-4, this particular version of it, only 92 were built. 21 of them ended up going to the Marine Corps, the rest to the Navy. This was the last wooden wing biplane fighter used by the U.S., both the Navy or the Army. The F4B-4 had a all-metal monocoque or semi-monocoque fuselage, but the wings were still wood, and this is the last time there would be wood wings on a biplane for either one of the services. So originally, this was first built in 1927. Boeing produced, the model 83 and 89. The difference between the two, the 83 was the F4B, and the 89 was the P12 for the Army. So they're virtually identical, with a little bit of service difference, mainly for the Navy being able to utilize the aircraft on carriers. So the first flights of them were 25 June 1928 and August for the P12. So initially, the Navy had solid axle landing gear. The Army had the split axle with the bomb rack. And as far as the Navy production goes, the first production ones issued were the F4B-1. They did get a split axle on that one. There was 27 produced in that model. The F4B-2 introduced a ring cowling, spreader bar axle, free ailerons, and a tail wheel instead of a skid, and 46 were produced of that. The F4B-3, those productions ran from December 31 to January 32. That's when they got the first semi-monocoque fuselage, and there were 21 of those produced. And then finally, the F4B-4 was produced from July 32 to February 33. They had a raised headrest about halfway through the production, got a further raised headrest in order to be able to store a life raft in it. Those are usually kind of identified by a slight squareness to it. This particular model here has the curved headrest. This is the early F4B-4. They also had a redesigned tail. They went to a little bit more of a square shape as opposed to a triangular shape of the F4B-3. And they also got wing racks for 116-pound bombs. So a total of 586 of the F4Bs and P12s were produced. 366 P12s, 187 F4Bs. There was also 33 demonstrators and export models. These did get exported for the air forces of Brazil, China, Philippines, Spain, Thailand. All received F4Bs. And there was also some civilian versions. Those were known as Model 100s, and those were flying around. It's kind of interesting how back in the day, you could buy, as a civilian, basically a frontline fighter aircraft. Imagine that now. Go down to Northrop and go buy, a stealth fighter. Yeah, that'd be pretty interesting. But back in the day, that happened quite a bit. P-35s were being flown in air races, by civilians when they were frontline fighters. So not an uncommon thing in the 20s and 30s. So let's take a look at the kit now and see what we got. So this is, as I mentioned before, art by Joe Catula. This is the earlier Aurora Famous Fighters logo. This is the second version of it, where it's got kind of the Aurora Borealis rays in the background. That would go away and become just solid yellow background on it. And then you've got the kit price here, 69 cents. And the Boeing F4B quarter scale, which translates to 1/48 scale. And you also have the, commended by the, parents, associate, some organization that said, hey, it's good for kids to build models. So on the side, we've got continuation of the box art wraps around, which is kind of neat. Aurora Plastics in New York. Lithograph, which this box is a lithograph wrapped around a hard cover. And then the 1958. See the little tape remnants over here. This kit was originally taped shut. They didn't have cellophane wrapping on these. The plastic wrapping. Here's the other side tape. This tape was added by somebody later on, probably around the same time period, because this is a very old cellophane. We'll look around at the other side. This side's in yellow, nice and bright. This would be good for facing the front. And then we got the end. Repeat of the artwork, your kit number, 122-69. The dash 69, usually that last number, represented the suggested retail price. And same thing on this side. Nothing on the bottom. And we'll take a look at what we got inside. So you can see here, this is a lithograph print slick that was wrapped around a hard box and then glued into place. This is all hand done. These old hard boxes, I think, are pretty cool. They hold up a lot better than the folded boxes that came later. And they're standard size boxes that they would buy, hence the term box scale for a lot of companies, would make their kits to fit the box as opposed to a standard scale. This one happens to be in a standard scale of 1/48. So here we've got our instructions. Fold them out. So you've got a little bit of information about how to build a kit, some stuff to do. You've got step-by-step of putting your engine together with the cowl ring, your pilot inside. You actually got a seat, an instrument panel, which is a little more than a lot of kits had in the 50s. The next step is putting on your bracing struts. They call this a machine gun, but I think that's actually the sight. I don't think the machine gun was exposed on the F4B. And the final bits and bobs. You did come with the bombs, which the F4B had the bomb racks. And you get, what's kind of neat too, is you got a little bit of land here with the mechanics, so you could kind of do a little diorama with it, or you could put it on one of their stands. And then the final assembly here showing you how to put the wings on. You've got an ad for some speed dry paints. Now, of course, they're recommending that you use Aurora's polystyrene cement. More information about Aurora down here. You want to write to them. Yeah, and what's kind of neat is they show you a photograph of the completed model on here. Flip this over, and you've got a list of all the kits that are being produced by Aurora, from a lot of aircraft, helicopters, bombers, some warships, sailing ships, a few tanks, vehicles, warriors, the whole Knight series. That was cool. Guys and Gals of the Nations, these were interesting. and all these different kinds of figures, which eventually led to Aurora making the Monster series. But initially they were producing just all kinds of different figures, from Dutch boy, Dutch girl, Haitian lady, flying geese, a lot of different stuff. They sold, but not as well as the Monsters eventually did. And then this kit here, the F4B, was part of their 30 series, so they also produced P-12, Helldiver, Hawk, P-26, and a mail plane. Again, a lot of these are hard to find. The Helldiver I know is really difficult to find. It's one I'm looking to hopefully find at some point here. And then some HO scale stuff. So there's no, like 3-view or anything for painting. It looks like you're just being given directions with this photograph of how to paint this. And I guess you could also look at the box cover. If you notice, may or may not have noticed, but this box cover's got a white tail, but the painting instructions show a green tail. So keep that in mind for a moment. Now we'll take a look at our decals. So first we got the little Boeing F4B-4 that would go on to the stand. And then here we have the full decal sheet. It's kind of warped a little bit. These are pretty aged. Looks like there might be a little bit of cracking, occurring on here. So their paper's definitely yellow. Looks like the background on it has yellowed as well too. But even using the sun technique, I'm trying to take the yellow out. These probably are going to disintegrate when used. But it does have a specific aircraft on here, an F4B-4 9025. It's got some squadron coding, one F1, and E for efficiency, or excellence in gunnery. And you got the hi-hat squadron badge. So let's talk about the markings. So the hi-hats at the time were VF1B. They did fly F4Bs. The challenge with trying to find some reference on this is a little bit of the confusion by what's being shown on the box art and the decals and the instructions. So VF1B, as mentioned, was the top hatters. They were assigned, to the Saratoga, which are the whitetail. If you're not familiar, the U.S. Navy colorings during the 30s kind of changed a lot, but for a while they assigned a specific tail color to the aircraft carrier. So in this case, white was assigned to the Saratoga, and green was first assigned to the Langley, and then eventually that went to the Ranger. But during this time period when the F4B-4 was flying, white was assigned to the Saratoga. Now, VF1B, the top hatters, did fly off the Saratoga, but that was earlier when they were flying F4B-3s. Later, when they were flying F4B-4s, they weren't assigned to an aircraft carrier. The white tail ones were actually from VF6, and there was also a squadron that was flying with the green tails off the Langley, but that wasn't VF1B. So these decals and box art and recommendation for painting are kind of spurious. I tried to see if I could find a photograph of the specific serial numbered aircraft 9025. That is a correct serial number for this aircraft, and it was assigned to VF1B, but I wasn't able to find a photograph of it to see, what paint job it had that they may have been going off of. So, so this is, I think, kind of a fantasy, or they had a picture of an F4B-3 when it was on the Saratoga, and they just transferred those markings to this kit, even though it's an F4B-4. The other things that you see on here, the 1F1, so the 1 is for the VF1, the F is for VF, so it's a fighter, and then the 1 is for the squadron leader's aircraft. So that's also represented by the red. So the red is the first section. The chevron, which would go on top of the wing, would be the leader of the first section, and the full red band would also be the leader of the first section. And then the cowling would be a full red cowling as well, which would be the leader of the first section. And so then the second section, or the second aircraft in the section, would have the top half would be red, and then the third aircraft, the bottom half, would be red. So it was an interesting way of doing that. And then each section had a different color, so you could have different colors going all over the aircraft, which is what made 30s Navy some of the most colorful aircraft ever flown. Kind of a really neat time period, and really fun for modeling. So I was able to find a few photographs of aircraft from the squadron, just not this exact one. So I'll show you a couple of those here. All right, so let's take a look at the kit now. So we'll start with the fuselage. A lot of these kits from the early days had very minimal trees, a lot of loose parts. The large parts were almost always loose, so very minimal amount of trees. And you see there's not wraparound trees, so the smaller parts that were on, the few trees that were in there, would fall off fairly easily. So here we got our fuselage, and it's a mix of some raised panel lines, but a lot of engraved. There's some rivet detail on here, which is actually fairly fine. You've got some detail on the rudder, the corrugated skin that was used on the rudder and the fin. But overall, pretty nice looking little kit. Fit's not too bad. Not a lot of filling would be needed in there. Fairly tight fit. So pretty good kit. So that's the fuselage. Now we've got the wing is a one-piece wing, and that has some representation of the fabric covering. The bottom half is fairly smooth. You do have some corrugation again on the ailerons. And we've got our lower wings, which have some more fabric representation. And looks like wing walks, a little rough area for the wing walks to get up in the cockpit. Flat bottoms on those. And then let's look at our trees here. This looks like we've got some interplane struts, fuselage struts. That's the radio mast. Got an aileron. Got part of the cockpit, rudder pedals maybe. And some more struts. Oh, all this has left is the tail hook. Very nice. This one's got probably the back of the propeller hub and the instrument panel. Not too bad. I mean, there weren't a lot of instruments in these. There's your pilot seat. Not much to that. A couple of bombs. You do get the little propellers in the front to arm the bombs. Not bad. Here's the tailplanes. These also have the corrugated skin on them. Very subtly done. Do have ejector pin marks, so be sure to put this on the bottom because that would be extremely difficult to repair that. So, yep, those go on the bottom. Got your radial engine. A little bit of detail on it, but not much. Got your cowl ring. And landing gear struts. A couple of wheels. You have something represented on there, right where the little cover would be for putting the air in. I believe this is a tank that went up underneath the fuselage. Part of the engine ring. And here's what they called a gun, but I think this is actually the gun sight. And we've ended up with 2 windscreens. Not much to those. These are really thick. Given the shape, these would probably be pretty easy to fabricate out of plasticard, clear acetate or something. These are really, really thick. Not that they're going to do much. Then finally we got ourselves a little pilot. He's get a good focus on this. There we go, a little bit. Yeah. So he's kind of blobby. Great pose, but not a lot of detail to him. And there we have the ground crew or the pilot standing there. Again, the detail on him is really soft. Too bad, that's a pretty neat little pose. And then finally, we have that little piece of ground and some chocks. So kind of a neat way to display it. There is not a stand in here, so I'm pretty sure it came with the stand since it's got this separate decal specifically for the stand, but at some time the stand has disappeared. But according to the instructions, it looks like it was the regular stand that Aurora used for a lot of their smaller sized kits. So let's talk about what's left of the F4Bs. There's a few of them around. There's a P-12E in the Air Force Museum at Wright Field in Ohio. There's another P-12E at the Plains of Fame in Chino in California. I was, growing up seeing that one myself. That one's painted as an F4B-3, which the P-12E is kind of the direct matchup to in production. The P-12F, which is more of the match to the F4B-4. There is one of those at the Naval Aviation Museum in Pensacola, Florida. And that P-12F has been restored as an F4B. So they not just painted it, but actually made the changes physically to it. Finally, there is a real F4B for the Smithsonian. It used to be on display, but that's now in storage, I believe. So you may not be able to see it if you do go to the Smithsonian. Finally, there's a couple of Model 100s. One's in the Museum of Flight in Seattle, and the last one's a Model 100E that's at the Royal Thai Air Force Museum in Bangkok. So surprising for as few aircraft that were built, and relatively large for the 30s, but comparison to a lot of other aircraft, there's actually quite a few still surviving. I believe there's also a few that are under restoration right now. There's also been some reproductions and replicas, like 3/4 scale replicas. I think there was a kit plane during the 70s that kind of looked like a P-12 or F4B. So finally on the kit, let's wrap this up. We've got Aurora reissued this in 1959. A little bit of change in their boxing. The logos and stuff changed on it. Then there was another issue by K&B in 1972. And then finally, Aurora, Canada did their version of it in 1972. So that was it for the actual Aurora issued kits. Now on the side, there's a Japanese company called Marushan. And Marushan or Marushan, apologize to our Japanese speakers out there for butchering that pronunciation. But they were notorious for ripping off other people's models, particularly Auroras. And so in 1960, they issued an F4B-4 as well. And they actually went even so far as to rip off the box art too. I mean, it looks like it's an Aurora, it's this kit. But they made their own molds, probably from the kit itself, because it's slightly off scale. It scales out to 1/50th scale. So that was in 1960. There were additional issues with different box art in 61, 63, and 67. There was another one by RSL, which was, I believe, an offshoot or another branding for Marusan in the 60s as well. I'm sorry, that the RSL was the New Zealand company. So a New Zealand company issued their version of this in the 60s. Then the final one was from overseas was by Fuji. They did an issue of this in 70. And the final one was by Entex. Entex got a number of molds from all kinds of different companies, a lot of Japanese companies, and reissued a lot of kits in the late 70s, early 80s. And the Marusan F4B was one of them, so they did one issue of it in 1981. So don't be confused by that kit. It's pretty close to this one, but like I said, a little off scale, probably because of it just being a straight copy of the mold or of the finished model, which changed the size of the mold maybe. But if you get a chance, pick this kit up. It looks like it's a pretty good kit. So that's about it for today. If you've built one of these or one of the other 30s Aurora kits or any other vintage aircraft or armor or car or whatever, if it's in the kit from the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, even the 70s, send in some pictures of what you've been building, and we'll include it on our next viewer build video. Well, that's it for today. So thanks for watching, and have yourselves a great rest of your day.